You nudge the thermostat up, you open the fridge, you grab a puffy coat and step onto a floor that's only cold because you're paying for the privilege. Now delete it all in 1 minute. No heat, no insulation you didn't make, no grocery stores, no dry socks waiting in a drawer, no sealed windows, no deliveries, no walls that stay standing while you sleep. Outside, wind pushes snow under a hide shelter. A smoky hearth sputters, and somebody scrapes ash over embers like they're hiding money. A child's toes press into bedding that feels damp. The ground pulls heat out of everyone, all night long. If you delete every modern winter advantage in 1 minute: heat, insulation, grocery stores, dry socks, what keeps an Ice Age camp alive until sunrise? Here's the hard part. Winter isn't a toughness contest. It's an energy and heat loss problem that gets audited nightly. Wind steals warmth faster than still air. Wetness ruins insulation. Contact with cold ground drains you, even if the air temperature doesn't sound dramatic. And every missed calorie makes the next hour colder. Ancient humans did not defeat winter, they built small pockets of warmth inside it. Those pockets only worked when layers worked together. Insulation on bodies, managed fire that doesn't die when the wind shifts, shelter that blocks drafts, shared calories that keep metabolisms running, and group coordination, so someone is always tending the system. And ancient humans weren't one group. Early humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens faced different winters in different places, and archaeology shows hearths and shelters used again and again, just not in one universal pattern. Before we talk about fire or fur, what actually kills you first in a deadly winter? Freezing or running out of energy? Someone is awake because the wind changed. A hand drags the windbreak a few inches closer. Another person feeds the fire with wood that's been kept dry, because wet fuel smokes and sulks instead of burning. Someone else shoves the sleeping hides up onto a thicker pad so bodies aren't pressed straight onto frozen ground. Then a hunter comes back from a long push in the dark. He's breathing hard. He isn't shaking for drama. He's shaking because he worked up sweat, and now the wind is grabbing that wetness and turning it into a refrigerator. That's the real question when we say ancient humans survived winter. Whose winter are we talking about, and what problem were they solving? Paleoanthropology is clear on one thing. Prehistoric humans weren't one people. Early humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens lived in different places and different cold seasons, from harsh Ice Age Europe to other regions with milder winters. So there's no single caveman winter plan, but there was one shared fight. Winter is a heat loss battle and an energy crisis at the same time. Heat leaks fastest when wind strips warm air off your skin, when wet clothing steals warmth as it dries, when skin is exposed, and when the ground conducts heat out of you like a cold countertop that never warms up. Meanwhile, cold pushes your body to burn more calories, right when winter cuts down plants, scatters animals, and makes every trip cost more. Your weather app calls it feels like. Ancient humans lived inside feels like all night, with no Gore-Tex, no space heater, and no food delivery. If warmth is leaking from every direction, what do you build first? Fire, or something that stops the wind and ground from stealing it? A hand disappears into a pile of snow and needles, digging under a sagging branch for the one thing that still snaps instead of squishing. Dry wood. Not a lot. Just enough to keep the night from turning into a long, cold problem. We talk about fire like it's the obvious winter solution. So why wasn't it a guaranteed win every night? Because fire isn't a button. It's a job. It needs dry fuel when the world is wet. It needs shelter from wind that steals heat. It needs air without turning your shelter into a smoke box. And it needs someone to keep feeding it when everyone would rather sleep. That starts with fuel logistics. In deep cold, finding wood can mean prying it out from under snow or breaking it off buried branches. Every fuel trip costs time, warmth, and risk. Then there's keeping fire alive when you can't easily restart it. One person carries a living coal wrapped and protected, like a tiny, fragile piece of tomorrow. Another banks embers under ash so they can be breathed back into flame. Inside, the hearth placement matters. Put it wrong and the smoke doesn't leave. The entrance faces the wrong wind, the draft flips, and suddenly the shelter fills with stinging, low smoke. And here's the twist. The same wind that keeps you breathing can also kill the fire. A gust shifts, snow drifts in, and the fire's edge dies where the cold air bites through. Fire helped ancient humans with warmth, cooking, drying gear, and light. That last one mattered more than people think. Extra hours meant repairs, scraping, binding, mending, quiet work that kept the whole system running. Today, you start a fire by paying a utility bill. Back then, the cost was constant attention. Even if the hearth is solid, why doesn't warmth stick? And what turns a hide into something you can actually live in and move in? Your zipper snags, you yank it once, and you move on with your life. In a deadly winter, that little failure is not annoying. It's a problem that can chase you for miles. So what did winter clothing actually mean before factories, before closets, before you could buy warmth in a finished size? And why might sewing have mattered as much as hunting? In cold places, a hide wasn't just something you threw over your shoulders. It was portable shelter you had to build. Someone scrapes the inside clean until it stops rotting. Someone works it until it softens instead of cracking. Someone twists sinew into cordage strong enough to pull tight and not snap. Then the real trick begins. Insulation isn't just fur. Warmth depends on fit, layering, and staying dry. A loose wrap helps, but a shaped piece that closes gaps traps warm air better. Layers let you work without flashing bare skin to the wind every time you bend, lift, or climb. By the hearth, hide-working tools show up again and again at Paleolithic sites. In some later Ice Age contexts, bone awls and even eyed needles appear, including at high-latitude sites like Yana RHS. That doesn't mean everyone had the same tailored wardrobe. It means some groups built more complex clothing systems, with parts that could be assembled and fixed. And fixing is the point. A child's sleeve seam rips. Cold air snakes in. The group stops, because that small tear will widen, get wet, and turn into dangerous heat loss. An awl punches new holes. A bone needle pulls sinew through. A boot-like wrap gets patched before dawn travel. Your jacket is a product. For prehistoric humans, the coat was months of labor, plus a repair culture taught by watching and doing, while the weather outside is trying to kill you. Clothing keeps heat in, but winter still demands more fuel than your body normally burns. So, where did the extra calories come from when plants disappeared? You tear the foil top off a yogurt and swallow a few hundred calories without thinking about it. In the dead of winter, ancient humans didn't have quick calories. They had hard work, risk, and whatever the land would still give up. Stone hits bone, not a gentle tap, but a committed strike. The crack is sharp, and then fingers go slick as marrow gets pried out and eaten before anyone argues about the best cuts. Nearby, strips of meat wait by the heat, turning into something that might last. How do you keep warm when the landscape stops handing out easy food? And why isn't lean meat enough? Cold doesn't just feel bad, it raises the bill. You burn more energy just staying alive, and winter shrinks plant foods into almost nothing in many places. Hunting gets harder too. Tracks vanish under snow, wounds get dangerous fast, and a failed day costs you more than it would in summer. That's why the group goes for fat first. Not because it looks nicer, but because it works. Marrow, organs, and fatty tissue pack usable energy that helps cover the winter gap when protein alone can't. Cut marks and repeated bone-breaking patterns at many Paleolithic sites fit this exact logic. Don't waste calories trapped inside a skeleton. And then comes the social math. Someone quietly sets aside the fattiest pieces for children and a nursing mother. Sharing spreads the risk of bad hunting days, even if it stings. Sometimes, where the ecology and mobility allowed it, a bundle gets hidden in frozen ground as a small bet against tomorrow. But caching isn't universal. If you can't defend it or return to it, it's just a gift to scavengers. You solve winter calories with a grocery run and a freezer. They solved it by turning one animal into a week of decisions. What to eat now, what to dry, what to share, what to carry, and what to risk next. If food and warmth depend on where you are, how did groups decide when to stay put and when to move before winter trapped them? You stand at the edge of a ridge and do what you'd call house hunting. If your house could fold up and leave tonight, the wind is already leaning into your bones. Down in the valley, the trees and the slope break that wind. Off to the side, there's a known rock shelter, but the fuel is better nearer the river. And in the fresh snow, there are tracks that don't look random. They look like a corridor. So why didn't ancient humans just live in caves? And how did they choose the safest place to spend the worst months? Caves helped when they existed in the right place. But they look more common than they were because caves preserve evidence, while open-air camps and hide shelters usually rot, blow away, or get buried. Winter homes made of skin, wood, grass, and bedding don't leave the same kind of signature. Shelter was engineering against heat loss. Block the wind first. Get bodies off the frozen ground with thick bedding, piled hides, and brush. Stay dry, because damp steals warmth fast. And manage smoke, because a fire that can't breathe will choke you long before it saves you. In some regions, people even built sturdy frames from big bones, including mammoth bones, then covered them like tents. Not everywhere. But it proves the point. Winter shelter wasn't one look. Then comes the smarter insulation, leaving. Mobility wasn't wandering. It was a remembered map of fuel spots, animal routes, and protected terrain. At the ridge, the group chooses the valley with better wind cover and nearby wood, not the dramatic cliff shelter. You pick a home by commute time and Wi-Fi. They picked by wind direction, fuel access, and whether a child could survive the night on that ground. Even with the right camp, someone still has to keep the system running who watched the fire, repaired gear, and protected children while others hunted. You type "roads closed" into your phone, then you text a neighbor. That little network is winter technology too. In a prehistoric camp, the strongest winter tool wasn't a sharper point or a bigger fire. It was other people. One adult squats in the snow with kids, showing them how a hoofprint breaks at the edge when an animal slips. Another drops fat and broth into a shared pot, because calories don't care who made the kill. Near the hearth, a caregiver keeps an infant warm while someone else tightens a loose seam and replaces a snapped binding. An elder shifts the shelter entrance a few degrees away from the wind. Night watch rotates so parents can actually sleep. When everything is fragile, fire, clothing, food, shelter, what was the strongest winter technology ancient humans had? Cooperation. Here's the part that raises the stakes. Children. Someone has to hunt, but someone also has to manage breastfeeding, weaning, and steady warmth. Hunter-gatherer research shows food sharing and cooperative childcare are common ways to buffer risk. Archaeology even hints, in some places, that injured people were cared for instead of abandoned. Then the hunt fails. No hero returns with meat. And the camp still doesn't collapse, because food gets shared, repairs keep going, the embers are banked, and more than one adult keeps children alive. That's what winter selected for, groups that distributed labor and risk, not lone, tough individuals. Modern winter resilience still looks like systems, childcare, supply chains, repairs, neighbors, group texts, just with lower stakes and a number to call. So next time winter feels natural, what parts of your own warmth are actually borrowed from a system you rarely notice? If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for future videos.